I'd like to do something a little different than the presentations I usually do, and I want to engage you in this presentation if you want to be engaged. So it'll make it a little bit easier. I might be asking you if you have a question. I want to be able to hear it, and I want the people, the rest of the people in the room to hear it. I'll repeat them if necessary. So feel free to come, and while you're filling in the seats, I'm just going to tell you briefly a little bit about the Billy Meier case. Now, how many of you already have ever heard of Billy Meier? Raise your hand, right? Now, and you feel free to do this. Any of you think it's a hoax, possibly? You can raise your hand if you think it's a hoax. There we go. Okay, good. That's fine. It's okay. We have your name and number, and we're bringing you outside, and we're going to whip you with Pleiadian noodles. Here's how it goes. I'm actually going to spend just a little bit of time establishing a few things on the Billy Meier case. Then I've got questions, and I have things to say, and I've got comments about a lot of what's going on in ufology. Now, as you know, my lecture was titled something like, "Is Billy Meier the only real UFO contactee?" Now, some people automatically are going to say, well, of course not. And other people might say, who's Billy Meier, and is he really a UFO contactee? So what I want to do is tell you also why I'm not showing you a bunch of pictures today. There are more presentations available now on the internet where I've done countless numbers of lectures and interviews, etc., and other sites that I have nothing to do with, as well as my own website, where we have an abundance of the photographs, the film, the video, the evidence from Meier. And we have a film out where I interviewed Billy and produced a film on him, a documentary. I'll pitch that at the end of it in case you're interested. But here's the story in a nutshell. I'm only going to give you a little of the story. Billy Meier, Billy Edward Albert Meier, claims that ever since he was a 5-year-old boy in Switzerland, that he's been having face-to-face, voluntary, wide-awake meetings with human beings from another star system. Not little gray guys, not reptiles, not insects, not being abducted. He's meeting with human beings. Billy Meier has probably the most documented life, as well as the most interesting life of anybody that's ever lived, as far as I can tell. He has kept journals and notebooks and photographs going back to childhood. Most people don't know that in 1951, when he was only 14 years of age, when he already was well into his contacts with an extraterrestrial named Svath, that he published a letter with a couple dozen specific predictions about our world. And he sent that out to something like 3,000 people around the world. In 1951, he was foretelling climate change, environmental disaster, wars, terrorism. In 1958, he sent out another letter with 162 specific predictions, including 2 U.S. wars with Iraq, the second war, under a president who would be the son of a former president. It would lead to an unbelievable disaster. Later in that document, he specifically says 2 wars, they will be called the Gulf War, each one. He names AIDS by name, plastic credit cards, telephones that people will carry on them. He says that every home will have a television and a computer that will be linked electronically around the world. This is in 1958. Now, how many of you heard in any other presentations over the weekend talk about the Billy Meier case? Gee, no hands went up. So there we got a hand. Now, I wasn't here, so I don't know. But one would think, in my opinion, that if we're talking about UFOs and extraterrestrials and or cover-ups and disclosure and this and that, that certainly somebody who claims for the past 67 plus years to be a contactee should get a little bit of press, right? Just a tad. Now, when you add to that the man presented for examination over 1,200 clear daytime photos of up to 4 UFOs in a frame. When his first photos of UFOs, up to 8 of them were taken in India in 1964 when he was interviewed by the New Delhi Statesman in 1964, telling his story of UFO contacts, when a woman who at that time was a young girl in India witnessed not only the ships and Billy Meier, but a woman who came down and walked and talked with him on the grounds. And that woman today is a retired UN diplomat who says this happened. You'd think that somebody somewhere wants to give the guy a little press, wouldn't you? But what we find out is that, for the most part, the so-called UFO community, exopolitics specifically, PRG, X-Conference, you name them, all of them seem to have a blank space when we mention the Billy Meier contacts. Now, why could it be? Is it because the man's a hoaxer? I mean, in addition to the 1,200 clear daytime photos, we have 8 film segments. We've got a video that knocks your socks off, broad daylight. 4 different occasions when he recorded the sounds of the UFOs in front of as many as 15 people, including an undercover policeman. And the sounds from the UFO were so loud in this big, vast meadow in which he was recording them with the witnesses that people came from over 4 miles to find out what was making the sound and disturbing the peaceful Swiss countryside. But there's no mention of Billy Meier. Well, could it be that the 25,000, literally 25,000 plus pages of information that he has literally single-handedly, since he's a one-armed man, typed out at 60 words a minute in German, that comprise the contact conversations with these alleged, if we can say that only once today, extraterrestrials, plus his own work, that information, that body of information that's so vast, isn't worth a footnote when we're going to push for disclosure? Just what is it, folks, that we're trying to disclose? What do we want to force the government to disclose? Well, I'll tell you what we should force the government to disclose. I can't really come up with anything, and I'll tell you why. You know that when Barack Obama was elected president, he ran on a platform of ending the war in Iraq. Is that correct? Yep. Have we ended the war in Iraq? How many tens of millions of people voted for him to have him do that? This is, of course, my opinion about all of this stuff in the UFO world. Since I've been studying this for 30 years, a little more, and I've represented the Meier case officially for the past 4 or 5 years. I've been lecturing on it for over 20 years, making presentations in the US and other English-speaking countries as well. The idea that we're going to force the government to do anything it doesn't want to do should be demonstrably at this point a rather silly proposition. The other part of it is, what is it that we ultimately would force the government to do? Now, I'm relating all of this to the Meier case. If it's true that Billy Meier is a genuine UFO contactee, if that can be demonstrated to your own satisfaction, you know something then that the majority of the government, the so-called government, doesn't know, and some do, but they are mainly in the higher levels of intelligence, secret military operations, the people who fly most of the objects that are ever seen in the skies in our world these days, terrestrially based. This country and several others, including some private groups. The UFO cover-up has gone on since 1915, when these objects were first seen over the battlefields of Europe. And each of the sides thought they were the secret weapons of another side. And when nobody was attacked, they finally figured out, these aren't coming from here. So a conspiracy of silence was entered into. It was maintained through all of the American administrations and administrations in other countries. When we got to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, they decided, because they knew there were beings from other worlds that were certainly, at the very least, observing us. This is right around the time when the disks would start to be, crashing and retrieval of bodies and all that. There was a deliberate program set up through the intelligence agencies at that time, under the direction of Roosevelt, to force 2 people to cooperate in producing a media event. There was an author named H.G. Wells who had written something called War of the Worlds. there was a brilliant actor, director, producer named Orson Welles. And under threat of death to them and their families, they produced a horrendously scary program called War of the Worlds. People killed themselves over that. They thought little green men were landing in New Jersey. We might laugh about that today or not. This idea of a cover-up has indeed been perpetuated. But at this point, what is, let's say, the main thing that we ever hear about with UFOs? What's the big cover-up? Anybody know about Roswell? Hear about Roswell? Right. Let me give you, I'm going to act out Roswell for you. I have I'm glued here. I've got a nail through this shoe. That's Roswell. It means you can't get anywhere but here from there. There is nothing left. You will never prove that Roswell happened. And yes, if we use the Meier material, let alone anybody else's research, it absolutely did happen. Of course, the Meier material also said there were at least 8 other crashes, retrievals, but that the little beings that were found were not the extraterrestrial humans who constructed these craft. They were biological androids. So this is where we're getting the birth of the Greys, which has been turned into the hugest disinformation campaign in history, with everybody and their brother thinking they're either abducted, channeling extraterrestrials, meeting with the Space Brothers, or whatever you want to call it. So what's really going on here? We've got, okay, Roswell, you can't do anything with it, but everybody still wants to talk about it. So what is it that the government's covering up? What's being suppressed? Now, if I stand here, if I'm telling you the truth, which only you, through your own research, can determine, and it's one of the reasons why today I'm not showing you all the phenomenal photographs and films of Billy Meier. We're going to get captivated again on UFOs. UFOs don't mean a damn thing, except that they are unidentified flying objects, some of which are natural phenomena, believe it or not, some of which are possibly interdimensional, even life forms, and very few of which are extraterrestrial in nature these days. We've heard a lot of talk in UFO circles, and here as well, about the so-called extraterrestrial presence. How many of you think there's an extraterrestrial presence on the planet? Really? Okay. Now, I may ask you specifically what you mean by that, but let me give you a little take on this. Can you think of a good reason why advanced beings, let's just say human beings, who have to travel perhaps tens, if not hundreds of light years in space, who, in order to have gotten that far in their own evolution and technology, have advanced their own lifespans to hundreds of years, because in the process of space travel, you have to go and do the sub-light speed, and it takes years and years to get from here to there. In that process of evolution, in mastering space travel, perhaps time travel, in extending their lifespans, expanding their knowledge and technology, they want to come here so they can what? Get a job under the desert at Area 51? They want to work in our government and walk around mysteriously? Why? Oh, I know. It's because of our genetics. In other words, we who have abysmally, generally short lifespans, 70 to 100 years if we're lucky, who have degenerative diseases, all sorts of illnesses that we're heir to, living in a world that we've polluted to such incredible proportions that we're choking ourselves out. With high levels of aggression and anger, we can't live peacefully neighbor to neighbor, city to city, state to state, country to country. They want to come after mastering everything that would be a prerequisite to come here for our delightful genetics and to work for our government under the ground and make secret treaties. Secret treaties. Oh, that's right. If you can abduct somebody and float them through a wall, you've got to get somebody's permission for that? I'm going to propose to you that the real cover-up, the one that you won't hear about from most of the people speaking about these things, is the cover-up about the 67, almost 70-year-long contacts, which continue to this day with a man in Switzerland named Billy Meier. I'm going to propose to you that the reason that there have been 21 attempts on Mr. Meier's life is because his contacts are real. I will also propose to you that the reason the CIA, Swiss intelligence, and others maintained a physical monitoring base that you can drive by every day that you go down to visit Billy at the center, it's still there, although the CIA doesn't have to be that close anymore. The reason they did that, and the reason they were able to take their own photographs of these ships, is because the case is real. Now, let's jump back just a half step and say, if UFOs and extraterrestrials coming from somewhere else have actually been coming here, is there a reason for it? Or is it just to give us light shows in the sky, get us all worked up to send faxes to the government and run around and form new organizations and, heaven forbid, start political movements about UFOs and extraterrestrials? The last thing I want to be involved with on any level is politics and, frankly, religion. However, we're told that this has to be politicized. And, of course, we're going to force all the governments are going to reveal the truth. But where is the Billy Meier case? If it's true, how come nobody wants to say, well, hey, here's what we'd like you to know. There is an extraterrestrial reality, not necessarily presence of the planet. There is a person who has maintained contact with a specific race for nearly 70 years, since he's a 5-year-old boy. He has the most extensive documentation, physical evidence, informational, and let me put a side note in here. When I say informational evidence, I mean volumes of specific scientific and world event-related information, prophetically accurate. He beat NASA to major scientific discoveries, anywhere from 5 months to 32 years. I have put all this up for free in a website. You can read it. You probably didn't get directed to that website anytime this weekend yet. And I have a card I'll send you to theyfly.com if you want. So if there's a reason, and if there's somebody that has been contacted, and if we can study this for ourselves enough to be able to say, I can put aside reasonable doubt at this point. This appears to be genuine. We took on every skeptical challenge. Every one of the top professional skeptics came at and tried to attack this case, and I said, please, I'll give you an interview in our film. Make your best case. As a matter of fact, I won't interview you like I interviewed everybody else. I'll let you make your own presentation. You can script it, so that you don't feel like you're put on the spot by not being able to answer logical questions. So we had a skeptic, he made his presentation, I did a little rebuttal, and then after our film was out, I lowered the boom on him, and he had to retract all his claims that Billy Meier was using model UFOs and model miniature trees. This is how far people will go, but you didn't even hear that today, did you? You didn't hear about any of that challenge. So let's go back to my point. If there are extraterrestrials that have and or could still be visiting us, there's a reason for it. We claim that there's a man who's a genuine contactee. I go farther. I say he's the only one who can prove that he's a contactee. People can say all sorts of things. Can you prove it? So what is this reason? Well, the reason is to give us a volume, a body of work that will assist us, those of us who will find it, to assure our own future survival, and to give us, for a final time, for the 7th time in our human history, a pure, undiluted, uncorrupted, belief-less spiritual teaching that we can think through ourselves without any threats of damnation, hell, purgatory, being, having to go to confess anything and violating any big spiritual or religious structure, hierarchy, no intermediaries between us and the truth. This is the body of information presented to us. Well, why haven't they then landed, or why didn't they get one of these representatives from exopolitics to come and... Well, the answer is fairly simple. As soon as we, in our own quaint way, start setting up our hierarchies, our religions, and hand in hand with religion is politics, as soon as we do that, and whatever we want to call it, we muddy the waters and we once again allow the truth to be corrupted beyond recognition. If you can go literally for free and educate yourself I would guarantee you that from my website, and I'm not the author of all the art, there's plenty of stuff, and a couple others, reading the transcripts of this man's actual conversations yourself, you will know at least as much as 99% of the people that will take a stage to lecture on UFOs. The reason for that is, and with pointing to nobody in particular, because as I say, I just got here this afternoon, I have doubts that you saw anything, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, and I will address it, that shows you that there's any proof for the claims being made. Extraterrestrial presence? You mean at Christmas? I mean, what did they give us? Oh, you mean they're here? Where? Who? From where? How do you know? What's your proof? When a man who's actually established proof, and let me give a dig to my good friend Stephen Bassett, because he caught me unawares. This was far earlier in the year, I think it was in January, when he told me it wasn't time for the Billy Meier case to be brought to the public after 67 years, because it was more important that we send faxes to Washington. I have a personal problem with that approach, because if you're looking for the truth, you prioritize the truth. You don't prioritize your career, your network, your personal ambition. That would go for me as well. I don't mind being out of a job. I haven't given up my day job. Yeah, I'd love to be traveling all over all the time too. But you know what? The Meier case is the most suppressed story. The real disclosure would be, and if you could only imagine that day, when Barack Obama himself would step up to a podium and say, we have been able to establish that there is extraterrestrial existence, these beings. Some of these UFOs we see are definitely connected to an extraterrestrial race. There's a man in Switzerland who's been meeting with these people. They have a great deal of information for us. They are not going to come and land. They're not walking here now, and they won't be for a few hundred years, but they have made available to us a significant amount of information that you, me, and anybody else can vet for ourselves. We're not threatened or pressured by these people. They're not going to be hovering over our cities a la vie. They're not going to be sending anybody down to greet some of the self-appointed ambassadors to bring exopolitics, the earth concept of insanity, to the stars. They simply want us to have the sum total, the body of information that we ourselves can go through and correlate, and because we have the internet, we can find out, is this man telling the truth? Is it true that Billy Meier published 3 specific things about what would be found on Mars in 1976, and they are in copyrighted dated books that preceded the discoveries that were indeed announced as early as August of 2009? Is it true that Billy Meier, as early as 1958, announced that there were 2 planets beyond Pluto that would be discovered around the turn of the new century? And is that information also in copyrighted dated books? Now, if we are led to this type of evidence, and we are doing the work ourselves, we don't have to believe a darn thing. There's nobody to follow. It kind of goes like this. In the past, and this is information that you should consider speculative, because I'm now going to give you something you cannot prove and I cannot prove. Okay? Just so you know. It's information. It's not the most important information. What is said in this case, that 6 times prior to Meier, there have been people on our world specifically working with this particular lineage of extraterrestrials, which has not been the only group of extraterrestrials to be present in our past, primarily on the planet, doing manipulations and playing games with the primitive, evolving Earth humans, and representing themselves as the gods of all the major religions. These 6 specific prophets prior to Meier all received the same core spiritual teaching from these mentors. And in each case, these teachings were corrupted. They got corrupted when they were then part of the forming of, well, they were present prior to Judaism. Then they were corrupted for Christianity. Then in Muhammad's time, after him, they were changed as well. So who were the names, what were the names of these people? according to the Pleiaren, the extraterrestrials, they were Enoch, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Emmanuel, Muhammad. Oh, Emmanuel. Anybody here ever hear of Emmanuel? Okay. 7:14, Isaiah foretells the coming of Emmanuel, not the coming of Jesus, the coming of Emmanuel, spelled variously with an I or an E. In Matthew, when he's announcing the birth of Jesus, he lets it slip one time, and his name shall be called Emmanuel. Another strange piece of the jigsaw puzzle. So what's this about these 6 prophets, and how is Billy Meier supposedly connected to all this, and what's it about? Well, according to the information in this case, the speculative part of it, reincarnation is a fact of life. Now, we don't know that. We can agree with it. Some of us say, no, it can't be true. We either believe it or we don't believe it. According to this information, the human spirit, which is located deep within the brain, unlike the human soul, primarily located around the solar plexus, the spirit is the eternal, immortal part of us that reincarnates countless millions of times in the course of evolution in a grand design, not from a god, but from something they refer to simply as the creation. The 6 previous prophets were reincarnations of an even older lineage of human beings, someone whose original name was Nocodemian. I'm giving you some arcane information here that you can, if interested, look it up. My take on it is this. They looked around and they said, you know what? 6 times we tried to get this information into this world, and it's been screwed up every time. Why? Well, we're human beings. See, they're not perfect. And they're human beings, and wherever human beings are involved in anything, things can and will get screwed up. However, we're now entering what comes for these people as the electronic age. Instead of entrusting the information to a very small number of people, a main prophet, and then some people around him who can read and write, who will then write out whatever they want to write out, and the rest of the world can't even read or write, and whatever gets sent down throughout time and history bears very little resemblance to what the original teaching is. Well, instead of that, we have the electronic age now, and we want to avoid having another charismatic fellow that's either going to get overtly stoned or crucified and deified or has to run around, flashing a sword anywhere trying to liberate women and children. Of course, the way in our day now, the truth about Muhammad has been corrupted. They make him out as somebody that was an oppressor, and it was not the truth according to the information in this case. So this time, my take is they said, let's get a guy who by the time the world, to whatever degree, starts to find out about him, he's a middle-aged, pot-bellied, gray-bearded, one-armed Swiss farmer. No cult there, although people still are going to start, claiming it's some kind of a cult. So you get this guy who isn't, by the time you're really hearing about him, charismatic. Now, another factor is it's lucky you didn't hear about him in the late 50s and 60s when he was indeed traveling through the Middle East, like West Pakistan and Turkey. The hysteria about it, they do have to do with gravitational waves and some solar activity that happens every 11 years. And the fact that the Mayan, who produced that famous calendar that everybody's freaking out about, the Mayan basically were exterminated before they could do their next calendar. So the world doesn't end, their world ended. Famine, drought, they resorted to cannibalism, they were done. And the problem is that really what happens on December 21st, 2012 is the Earth appears to be nestled in the middle of the Milky Way galaxy, have a nice millennium. There it is. But the rest of it has to do with the problems created by people who are thinking apocalyptically and bringing forward disaster and destruction and death because it's what they're focusing on through their fear from New Age thinking, from religious thinking, or whatever else. So we who are interested in whatever ways, shapes, and forms in this type of thing, in basically what we would call spiritual or consciousness-related information, we have the responsibility to get the cobwebs out of our head and to get very, very grounded. We are told, in this case, that the Pleiaren people, who have enormously sophisticated technology, to put it mildly, through instantaneous transmission across 500 light years, it's pretty good. They still, in addition to their high-tech agriculture and producing things without disturbing the earth. They work in their own gardens. Billy said, if you shake their hand, you find a calloused hand. What? Yeah, because that whole sentence, wherever you go, there you are. People came here. There's nothing better about being from somewhere else. Once you're somewhere, you're living there. Excuse me, you know? And once you're incarnate in a physical body, you're going to be incarnating on that planet on which you die until you are able to move yourself to another planet that has human life and you die there. So, I'm an extraterrestrial, forget about it. There's at least 50 plus million human spirits of extraterrestrial origin that incarnate in our reincarnational cycle here on Earth, according to this information. So, maybe originally you were a tourist from Arcturus. I don't know. It doesn't much matter because we're here, it's now, we're human beings, and all the rest of this concern with fluffy stuff and fourth dimensions and light bodies and ascended misers or whatever else you're worried about, you know, forget it. They even tell you, you know, we don't know why human beings want to create angels and spirit guides for themselves when they are really the creators of all these things themselves. They are, with their own indwelling human spirit, with their own consciousness, they are more powerful than any intermediary, any imaginary spirit guide or extraterrestrial, anything else. There's something called the secret sciences, and Meier had said long ago, when the people of Earth can once again be privy to the secret sciences, all religions will end, all politics will go. We certainly won't be talking about any exopolitics because, see, politics isn't principle. Politics is the art of advantage. I will help you build this road if you can get me a farm over here to process chicken fat. It isn't about, I will help you build this road because it's the right thing to do. As long as we still think in any way, shape, or form in these political, diplomatic ways, which are simply sugar-coated lying to ourselves and each other because we don't dare say, I will not support that because I don't think it's the best thing, we will end up with the kind of thing that we have. And no fancy talk about ETs and all the rest of it is going to change it.